And once again, welcome to Silverwood Mennonite Church. Whether you're here in person or online, you truly are welcome here. My name is Zane Griggs, and most of you know me, not because this is my third week up on stage in a row, and I will definitely be doing story time next week, so like a whole month of it. Don't worry about it. But I'm a member here at Silverwood, and as well as a youth sponsor, and I used to be the pastoral intern, so I've been here a few times. It's been a few years. Today's sermon will come to you in 3 parts, but not like a normal, like 3 parts in a prayer. Not quite like that. But we are coming to you in 3 parts. We will start by looking at the text and unpacking that some. I focused on the first text we read today, the Matthew part. I'm not really touching the John part today, but it's great. Read that still. John's wonderful. I'm just focusing on Matthew today. So the first part is looking at the text and unpacking a little bit. The second part that I will be looking at is examining a fancy German word that resists an easy English translation. And we will figure out what that means. And I'll tell you that word later. Edge of your seats? No? Okay. Laugh, people. I have hilarious jokes. Thank you. Then at the end of the sermon, which honestly is going to take a lot of the time, we will be looking at, and I'll be sharing with you a little bit of what the kids these days would call my lore, or my backstory, or a bit of testimony for those of you who are not high schoolers. Oh, why am I down here? I don't know. So let's begin by getting right into the text. Let me read this again, and then I will unpack it some. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of God?" Then he called a little child over to sit among the disciples and said, "I assure you that if you don't turn your lives around and become like this little child, you will definitely not enter the kingdom of heaven. Those who humble themselves like this little child will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." These verses contain a lot of theological points that we could get to, but we only have a finite amount of time, and I hear that lunch is delicious, so I won't keep you till 2. Welcoming children is one of those points, or humbling yourself, becoming like a child. So many points that we could get into, but I'm going to focus on one point that in my studies of this particular verse, I haven't seen this touched on too much. And that is calling. I think that calling plays a big part in this verse that I don't see elaborated on very much. In verse 2, we see that Jesus called a child to him to sit among the disciples. Then the rest of this chunk of text, in there, we can infer that the child did in fact come to Jesus and sat amongst the disciples and listened to Jesus talk and all of that. It's not explicitly stated, but I think it's safe to assume that the child did come. So, whenever Jesus later then says that, make yourself like this child, there's so many things that we can unpack there, like I mentioned before, but what I'm focusing on is child called, child responded, child came to Jesus' feet, learned with the fellow disciples, and listen to the words of the gospel, listen to the words of the kingdom. With whatever intellectual ability that this child had, we don't know how old the child is. Could be a 2-year-old, could be a 10-year-old. I don't know. We're not provided that information. But with whatever ability this child had to listen and learn the kingdom of God, the child did. The child responded positively and wants to learn about what all of this is. What is the kingdom of God? There are many ways that Christians have interpreted this over the past few millennia, but some will understand it as like the afterlife, as the good place after we die. And I don't want to discredit that. I don't want to say that that's not part of it, but I think that that is part of what the kingdom of God is, not the entirety of what the kingdom of God is. I would say that in a lot of the gospel texts, in a lot of Jesus' teaching, I honestly don't think he's focused too much on that piece of the story. I think that he's oftentimes focused on the here and now and bringing the kingdom here to earth with us. I'm going off script, so let me find where I was. One moment. In Anabaptist theology, the kingdom of God is something that is here, but not yet. It's something that is described as the kingdom of God being near or at hand. It is a non-fully realized reality that we are building, we are participating in, we are creating, and we are still waiting for. It's something that escapes easy definition. I'm stumbling over my words a little bit because it's a complex thing to describe, but it's here and not yet. And that seems confusing. That is confusing. It doesn't just seem that way. It is living Jesus' teachings here and now. It is peace. It is justice. It is compassion. It is mercy. It's all the fruits of the spirits. It is heaven here on earth. Moving into our next chunk of the message today, the fancy German word. We're getting to that very soon. Deep breath, people. Deep breath. I know. All right. Many Mennonites in our denomination, MCUSA, use a fancy resource called Leader. It is wonderful. The denomination provides beautiful, beautiful resources, and it's really cool because what we're preaching here, I've heard that people across town are hearing us a very similar message. I think it's a beautiful thing that really helps resource pastors, but it also helps bring us together as a church, as a bigger church. I'm walking away from the mic, I'm so sorry. But all that being said, Leader encouraged us to focus on the German word Gelassenheit. Gelassenheit has been an Anabaptist theological concept since the 16th century, and that's hey dude. All right, since the 16th century, the first century of the Anabaptist movement. It is a very difficult word to translate into English since it encompasses so many different ideas that German speakers just naturally understand whenever they hear the word. Gamio, the Global Anabaptist Mennonite Encyclopedia Online, it's like Wikipedia, but for Anabaptism, and way more reliable than Wikipedia. Wikipedia is great, but there's some sketchy stuff on there. Gamio, it's curated, it's wonderful people, it's good, solid information. But they describe Gelassenheit as, let me get this closer because my highlight here kind of ruined the text. Self-surrender, resignation in God's will, yieldedness to God's will, self-abandonment, the passive opening to God's willing, including the readiness to suffer for the sake of God, also peace and calmness of mind. Other translations of this word might capture the ideas of composure or serenity or calmness. So it's carrying with it a piece of submission, yielding to God, and feeling some sort of peace. In a nutshell, that's my understanding of it. I'm sure that German folks and even Amish folks and older order folks would understand this a lot better. They use this word a lot more. But this concept is very familiar with older order conservative Anabaptists and particularly amongst the Amish communities. But us incognito Mennonites, we have forgotten this concept, and I understand Gelassenheit as yielding to God, finding a sense of peace. Moving on to my journey with yieldedness, my understanding of Gelassenheit and how it's played out in my life. So this is my lore, this is my backstory. This is a small sliver of my testimony. That's a weird word from my evangelical past. I don't really use that word too much these days. But my understanding of Gelassenheit is complex. Yes, self-denial is a strong part of it, but spending time with God through prayer and meditation on the scriptures, particularly the teachings of Jesus, are essential. We are not simply to be ascetic or putting down our comfort in order to gain some sort of spiritual strength, but to put down our selfishness for the sake of picking up the way of God. Let me start by telling you a little bit about my journey here, my backstory, really picking up around junior high. This will sound a bit like an ADHD-fueled rambling. It is. And I would apologize, but no. Deal with it. That's just how my brain works. So, bear with me as I attempt to get to the end here. And I will tie it all together and put a bow on it. Probably. We'll get there. We'll find out together. Sound good? Awesome. Where am I? I was not raised in an Anabaptist or Mennonite home. I come from something called the Church of Christ, or the Restoration Movement. There are many similarities between Restoration theology and Anabaptist theology, but they do have some significant points of difference as practiced in our current movement. Off script here for a second. I have studied extensively and has actually written a master's thesis on the early Anabaptist movement compared to the early Restoration movement, and oh my goodness, we're brothers and sisters. Like, we're the same thing, but over the centuries, we look different today, and I will leave that there. But at some other point in time, I could literally talk hours upon hours about these differences, and I think I chatted Doug's ear off one time when I first met him for a couple hours after church. It's a great time. That being said, sometime in junior high, remember I was in junior high a second ago, or maybe even early high school, I can't quite remember anymore, I felt a call at camp towards some sort of ministry, and then later a stronger call during a domestic mission trip out to like Iowa or something. That ministry was indeed something I'm doing in life, something I needed to pursue. In my home context of the Church of Christ, this really meant that preaching was the job for me. Grew up with a very narrow understanding of what ministry is. There wasn't much nuance to ministry outside of congregational pulpit ministry. So like this, when I was like 13, 14, this is what I was expecting to do. And although I never gave up on that call to ministry, which we'll get to, I'm not here. But we'll get there. I knew that folks went to school to become preachers, but I was remarkably bad at high school. I believe that my GPA started with a 1. I was really bad at school in high school. If you're still in school, focus. Unless you have ADHD, and then focus. One more time, focus, in case you didn't hear me the first 2 times. It's great, you're smart people, you can do it, I believe in you. But, all that being said, I was really bad at school. This caused me to look for alternative routes to preaching that didn't quite require a college education, because if I'm bad at high school, why am I going to pay money to do high school 2.0 to be bad at high school again? Not about to do that until 3 years later when I did that. But I started looking for like internships or apprenticeships or something, asking like pastors in my county that I super respected, and for 3 years, just no bites. It wasn't working out, but I eventually, through various signs, if you will, felt a calling to go to Bible college in Cincinnati. Yes, Jessica, my now wife, was already attending there, but that had nothing to do with me deciding to go to school there. Not at all. It was completely selfless. It wasn't, but like, that's a piece of it. There were a bunch of other signs pointing me toward like, get your butt to school. You can do this. Figure it out, because the route you thought you were going to take isn't working. Go conventional. Yeah. So I got to school. Went down to Cincinnati Christian University. Rest in peace. If you know, you know. If you don't, just be lost. But the, where am I? I'm somewhere. All right, I started off as a youth ministry major, and I really enjoyed my classes for a little while. I eventually realized that I wasn't being challenged in this degree program, and I realized that I was pretty decent at school, like in a different context outside of high school where it's just busy work upon busy work upon busy work. Like college, stupid easy, like to me. I understand not everybody, but my experience in high school to my experience in college, I was good at college, and it was great. So much so that I changed courses because I wasn't being challenged in the youth ministry program, and I wanted to look at something a little bit more challenging. So I stayed at CCU, but changed my degree program to something a little bit more rigorous, and I started to understand ministry differently. Go to Bible college and you learn some stuff about theology and ministry in the church. It's crazy. Pastoral, congregational preaching, not the only thing you can do with your ministry, with your life. If you're called to ministry, you got options. And I realized that there, and my option that I felt a calling toward at that point in time was something more academic, something like collegiate teaching, which after I finished my degree, I went on to pick up another one because apparently I'm decent at school. But yeah, so I went on to get my Master's of Arts in Religion in church history. Super big history nerd. Some might call me a historian, but without the PhD, some people will gatekeep that term. It's weird. Don't worry about it. So I went to get my Master of Arts in church history. Eventually started adjuncting. Like I was teaching college, and it was awesome. I loved it. Teaching was wonderful, and being able to get into deep conversations with folks and then also just pry teeth to get other folks to pay attention. It was fun, it was a balance, but that's what ministry was in my life for a while. And I was really comfortable with where I was. When I finished up grad school, when I was finishing up grad school, not quite to the end, I started looking at PhD programs, and at that point in time, one of the schools that I landed on, I was looking at, wanted an MDiv, which is a fancy Masters of Divinity, which is like a 3-4-year program. I had just finished up an academic 2-year program. And a PhD wanted the bigger one that's more ministry focused as opposed to academic focused. I'm salty about that still, but here we are. I shouldn't be salty because that led me here to Goshen. To Elkhart. I started going to AMBS to pick up that MDiv. Although I haven't quite finished it yet, lots of really cool things happened moving here. Like, I started coming here. Pretty soon into coming here, like moving to this area. Oh, yeah, and when my school shut down, did I mention that? I might not have mentioned that. This is why I don't go off script, people. I miss the big ones. In fall of 2019, we got 5-week notice that our school is shutting down at the end of the semester. That like super rocked our world. That was 100% of our family's income. Both me and Jessica had 2 degrees there each. We were teaching there, we were getting experience there. Like we considered fellow professors and professors that like, they were family. Like it was a close-knit community, and it got yanked out from under us. And like I just said, fall of 19, the whole world got yanked out from under us a couple months later with COVID starting. So that was great. It was terrible. I started coming here to Silverwood. I went to AMBS to get my MDiv. I was already looking at here before the school shut down, but it expedited my decision to move here instead of attend from distance. So we moved here. The world shut down. It was crazy. Do y'all remember that? Like 2020? Okay, it's fresh. It's fresh. Okay. I won't dwell on it too much then. While at AMBS, I started feeling a tug on my calling back toward congregational ministry. I realized that, number one, 10 years of academic education in theology will burn you out. And although I already have a couple of degrees, it's not enough to really be competitive in trying to find a professorship. Without my PhD yet, which I'm not going to get at this point, you're not going to get a job being a professor. It's just not going to happen. So, higher education, that door closed to me. At the same time, as I was realizing my call back toward something more church-specific, something more congregational ministry. And honestly, my internship here really, really opened that up for me. Like, I caught that bug again of like, oh yeah, no, like church, awesome. Like, that's where I want to be. So naturally, at the end of that internship, I started a new internship at a church camp, and then I was pretty high up at a church camp. So naturally, I felt a call towards church ministry, and I went to a church camp. Totally the same thing, don't worry about it. Breezing over some of the finer details, and just touching on the highlights and lowlights here, after some amount of time, it became very apparent that the position I was in and was filling at Amigo was not the position for me, and we very painfully left that situation. So, moving on to what does it look like after that? I struggled to find any work for a while. I applied to a bunch of different jobs, and I filled out my Ministry Leadership Inquiry, or the MLI, the fancy, essentially job application that you submit to the denomination that says, hey, can I have a job here? And they find you a placement, and you can have a job here. Filled that out. I didn't get a job here. I didn't get a job at a Mennonite church. Nobody was open at that point in time. I even filled out a bunch of other job applications. Tried to be an oil change mechanic, and with a resume that has multiple college degrees and not a lot of official experience working on cars, even though I have a lot of my own garage experience, they don't want to look at me because you're probably expecting too much, and we wouldn't want to say dirty words around you. I'm like, I don't care. But regardless, I struggled a long time to find any sort of work. But eventually I started picking up farming and selling baked goods and produce at the Elkhart Farmers Market. All those that might not feel like ministry work, I view it as helping feed my community healthy and delicious food while helping in a very small way, because we're not a big farm at all, helping to strengthen our local food supply and resiliency with ecological farming practices. This might not have been official church ministry, but I was doing, in my view, the work of Jesus by trying to help feed people. Also, you would be really surprised by the amount of conversations I've had at the market, super deep theological conversations. Like, I don't lead with like, hey, do you know about Jesus? Like, people ask, and it's awesome and weird and strange. Like, I've had some really deep conversations about church and theology and Jesus, just selling people bread or tomatoes. It's really cool. Currently, I don't have the details of what my ministry will look like in the future, very far into the future. But I know the general shape. I am called to love. I am called to educate. I'm called to further the causes of justice and mercy. I'm called to bring about the kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. I am being called in. Am I currently in a formal church role? No. Do I wish I was? Yeah, I do. But that door isn't currently open for me and my family. My next step in calling in ministry is actually starting in like a month. A month? I'm a 5th grade teacher. Like, I super stumbled into that job, and it's gonna be great. I have been a 6th grade sub for somebody at Bethany, went and had a baby and opened up a position for me. And that was amazing. But now I get to continue that same work like as an official teacher. They're trusting me to be like educating people. And it's amazing. This is wild and it's exciting and it's confusing and it's absolutely wonderful. God has been gracious enough to bless me with the next step revealed in my journey. One of the lenses in which I view theology and spirituality is through hymns. I really connect with hymns. And oftentimes, I personally think that the older the better. Not all the time, but oftentimes I do. But that's probably just the crotchety old historian in me. As often forgotten hymn that I sang and learned in my college's choir that I sang in for one semester is Lead Kindly Light by John Henry Newman. Brief summary of this hymn, is that it is written from the point of view of somebody going through a dark and depressive time in life and coming to a content state of asking God to simply show him his next step. Not needing to see the destination at the end of the long road, but simply one more step in front of him, trusting that God will take him to where he needs to end up going. He sings, "Keep firm my feet, I do not ask to see the distant scene, one step enough for me." Another hymn that is on repeat in my head all the time, in good times and in bad times, honestly, just on repeat, is It Is Well by, I love this name, I looked up who wrote it, beautiful name, Horatio Gates Spafford, like 10 out of 10 name, wonderful name. Quickly paraphrased, this hymn, in case you're unfamiliar with it, somehow, this hymn helps me, Nope, where am I at? All right. This hymn helps me remember that whatever my lot in life, God has taught me to say that it is well with my soul. Although sometimes I have to convince myself of this a little bit or a lot. Although I do not know my final destination in my ministry and in my life, I have learned to experience Gelassen Heights. I have become content with where I am at, even if it isn't where I wanted to be or planned to be or ever expected to be. I'm a 5th grade teacher. Did not study for that. Didn't know it was going to be on the test, but let's find out. I have experienced seismic shifts in this journey of my life, in this roadmap that I'm on. But so far, I have been able to say and get to a point of it being well with my soul, being content in God's will for my life. It might not always come quickly for me, but I eventually get there. I constantly try to sit by Jesus' side as the child that Jesus called. I try to be that among the disciples and to learn the kingdom teachings about justice and about mercy and about love, about how the gospel acted out by disciples of Christ brings the kingdom here to earth. Music team.